Hello.
How's it going?
Oh, it goes. I don't know, man.
I'm just here.
It's been a day. Looking forward to this. Forgetting all my worries for a few hours.
I know, getting to just enjoy recording the podcast and having fun instead of worrying about why the correct audio file didn't download and in turn then didn't have the correct audio file uploaded. Very fitting to the name of episode 7, Professional Idiots.
God. It worked out too perfectly.
So many problems. For whatever reason. We don't know why, but we got it fixed. Thank God Austin is apparently the first fucking person to listen to each new episode every week.
I gotta make sure that it's up and ready and everything sounds good, even though I know it's gonna be.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just something I'm trying to get used to my own voice, and that's why I listen to it, I think.
Yeah.
And it was funny today because I went to go listen to it. Our music, it fades off, and I'm like...
So when you texted me and you were like, what's going on with the episode? I was like, what do you mean? So I went to go listen to it. I was like, what's going on? So I heard the music start, and immediately I was like, this episode doesn't start with our music. This episode starts with a little outtake.
Uh-huh.
And the funniest part about that is when I was making the YouTube video last night, because of course I was on top of that, I had clicked play on the video to just make sure that everything lined up and worked, and I heard the music and went, great, that's how it should be, that's how it always is. Didn't even think about it.
Nope.
So I had to remake the video today, and of course the program that I used to make the video was just not wanting to function for me.
Of course.
So to restart the computer, log in a bunch of times, did the whole damn thing. Finally got it made. Takes about 2 hours to export.
Oh, only 2 hours.
Only 2 hours, and then
Okay.
it takes another multiple hours to upload to YouTube. So.
Jesus. You could literally be sitting on there for half a day before it even decides to
Yeah, so
post.
that's why the YouTube video is, I think currently it's still not up. I think it was at like 45% when I left.
Oh. 45% when you left to come over here? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Cool.
So it'll be up. Shout out to the people who are listening on YouTube, though. I very late saw the comments that you all left. Dee Dee commented a few times.
Oh, I did see DD commented.
And then a few random people that just seemed to have found us. Somebody said that the podcast had been recommended to them and they really liked what we were doing. So just lots
that
of
word
good
of mouth
stuff.
is getting out really nicely.
Yeah, so special shout out to our YouTube watchers because we haven't been having a lot of activity on YouTube.
They're the real MVPs right now.
At this point, yeah.
Okay, the rest of our followers on any other platform, step up your game.
Don't even. Those followers are also wonderful. Speaking of platforms, though, because of those technical difficulties we had weeks ago with the multiple listings and everything, a lot of our initial followers on Spotify we lost. And I think we had like close to 30. So yeah, RIP. This is just your friendly reminder to follow us on whatever streaming service you're listening to. Also follow us on social media. Come say hi. And that's it. That's my little PSA.
And if you don't really like true crime or paranormal, or only like half of it or the other half, recommend it to a friend. Spread the good word. Anyways, welcome to episode 8, Hannah. This is going to be a good day. So, I got a few little stories to share with you before we get going into our stories.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Okay. The first one headline is, Putin is killing the dolphins. What does that mean? So, in the
I mean, why am I not surprised?
I know, right?
What is he not doing at this point that he shouldn't be doing?
Here's how he's killing the dolphins. It's in the Black Sea, and scientists, biologists, marine biologists are highly certain that due to the extra activity of warships and submarines using sonar and everything like that, and dolphins use sonar to eat or to hunt and to navigate the oceans, they're just washing up on shore, and they're thinking because all the sonar is going on, dolphins are getting confused and losing their hunting grounds and ability to hunt. So they either starve or they go mad.
Great. Thanks. I hate it.
On to a one that I know Hannah will love. Here, the next one I found is, have you heard of the United States cheese caves? And it's not what you think. It's not what you're thinking either.
I feel like I did actually hear about them recently, but it was like really in passing.
Okay.
So tell me more.
So the U.S. cheese caves are hundreds of feet below the ground in these limestone caves that the government literally just owns. And during the middle of the 1960s, late 60s, early 70s, there was basically a dairy shortage. Not a lot of people were eating dairy, which weird. You always think
there was a shortage or like a shortage of consumerism of dairy.
Like more of a shortage of consumerism.
Okay. So the supply wasn't equaling the demand.
Yeah.
Got it.
But they raised the demand. Jimmy Carter poured mass amount of money into the dairy industry, and the dairy industry started overproducing more. And they were just going and trying to make as much as you can, because then the demand raised as well with their whole got milk and all this other stuff. So the dairy farmers overproduced, and they couldn't sell it all. So the government, pouring all this money in and having a contract with them, had to legally buy all the cheese from the farmers. Legally had to buy it all. And as of 2019, there was an inquiry on how many tons of cheese there were sitting in these limestone caves.
Still at this point?
There's still. Can you guess how many tons of cheese as of 2019 is sitting in those limestone caves?
Like 20 tons.
You're way off.
Oh, no.
1.4 billion tons of cheese.
Give me the cheese. I will buy the cheese. I want the cheese.
You want to know the bitch of it, though?
What?
The cheese is so bad and moldy, they can't do anything with it.
Never mind. I don't want the cheese.
They're sitting on 1.4 billion tons of cheese, and they can't do anything with it.
1.4 billion?
Billion, with
billion
a B.
tons of moldy cheese.
Yep. I mean, cheese is mold, but it's extra mold.
Well, yeah.
It's mold with a spice.
It's deathly cheese. Okay, so why is it still there?
There's a lot of questions on why and why
Did
and
we
more
just
why.
forget about it for a little bit?
Well, they can't sell it, and it's been going bad since the 70s.
Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like you could capitalize on come get the cave cheese. We have cave cheese. Do you want cave cheese? Come buy our fucking cave cheese. We have 1.4 billion tons of it.
You know, I think a lot of millennials would jump on that if they
I
were.
would.
Yeah, I know you would.
I was going to say, when you started talking about it, I was like, is there caves where I can go and get cheese? I
mean, technically, if you don't want to die.
Forget the crystal caves. I want the cheese caves.
They have to go on the East Coast. I think that's where it is.
Are they...
It's like Kentucky or something.
Do they happen to be connected to Mammoth Cave? Because that's Mammoth Cave is over 400 miles.
It could be.
Correctly.
I mean, it could be.
And there's a lot of cave systems that they found were actually connected to it.
Could you imagine just walking through one of these caves and next thing you know, it's just a fuckload of cheese in a room? It's really hard to say.
The dream.
The dream.
All right. Well, since I was going to ask you 2 episodes ago if you wanted to choose the side and I'll flip the coin, but we had decided, then...
We had 2 episodes that were...
They were a little different, but I'll flip the coin and let you decide this time.
Okay. There's the coin.
There's the coin.
I choose tails. Wow.
That went far. It's heads.
Every time, unless I interject. All right, in the scheme of keeping the continuity with the show, Hannah, start us off.
All right, Austin. Today I'm covering the Eastern State Penitentiary.
Ooh, okay. Oh, wasn't that one of the haunts you went to?
Yeah, there was.
Yep.
I think it was actually the first haunt I went to with the hayride on that trip. We went to 3 or 4, and it was. I think it was the first one, the day that the first evening that we were in Philly. So.
Nice. It's I'm wondering, I was like, why does that sound so familiar? I'm like, oh yeah, there's a haunt there.
Yeah, so I've actually been there. I went there for their haunted house, which I'll get into a little bit later.
Okay,
kind of
cool.
toward the end, because I do talk about kind of what's going on there now.
Nice.
But we'll start with the history of it.
Do her up.
The Eastern State Penitentiary is a former prison that was in operation from 1829 to 1971, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. When the building was finished being constructed in 1831, it was the largest and most expensive public building at the time.
I believe that for how massive that building is.
Mm-hmm. I also read that it actually opened before construction was finished.
What's going to be open at a penitentiary before construction's finished?
They got a couple one or two cell blocks finished before they opened it and started using it.
Oh, they were eager to get them son of bitches in there, huh?
They were. Yes. So its location was originally outside of the Philadelphia city limits in Francisville. I think I read that it was actually on a cherry orchard. Yeah. But now the location, it's the same location. It hasn't moved. It's basically a castle. Now this location is actually in downtown Philadelphia with the way the city expanded.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
It's a National Historic Landmark, and it is believed to be the most haunted place in Pennsylvania.
See, that I believe wholeheartedly.
Eastern State is thought to be the country's first true penitentiary, as its whole purpose originally was penance. So this prison was revolutionary for its time, as it was built with the intention of focusing on rehabilitation versus just punishment.
Oh, okay.
So penance, like repenting for your sins, all of that.
Okay. Now it makes sense.
Once the prison was completed, its design and model for prisoners was copied worldwide by about 300 different prisons.
Wow.
I think, if I remember correctly, I think almost every continent has had prisons based off of this.
So why can't our prisons now today be based off that as well? This is why I say the U.S.
Just wait.
Okay.
You'll see.
Okay, I'm jumping the gun. I see.
Yep. So the prison was designed by John Haviland. He specifically designed the outside to look menacing like a Gothic fortress, so it would instill fear in people and deter them from committing crimes. Which, let me attest, it does. It looks like a Gothic fortress. There are gargoyles on the walls. The walls are super tall, and they've got towers and everything. It's insane. So, I get that idea by making it look menacing, but it's a little ironic considering how he designed the inside.
Okay, if it's Gothic and scary on the outside, I can only imagine what it's going to be on the inside now.
The inside of the cell blocks were designed to create a church-like feeling with tall vaulted ceilings and natural light pouring in.
Churches already give me the creeps enough.
The doorways at the end of the cell blocks were tall and arched, but the doors into each cell were short, which made every prisoner have to bow to enter their cell. Some thought that this was for security and safety of the guards, but others speculate that it was to encourage penance and believed the bowing to be related to the overall religious inspiration for the building.
Or be part of a cult.
But here's the thing. I think they were onto something here, and it just so happened that the moral standards at the time came a lot from Christianity and Catholicism and everything. It doesn't look distinctly like a church, but with those tall ceilings and the light pouring in, it gives it a healthy feeling, in a sense.
A healthy feeling. I can see what you're saying.
Because remember, when this was built, nobody even had thought of electricity at this point. So having that lighting pouring in,
right,
and the way that it was built was kind of monumental. A lot of prisons at this time were small, dark, and dingy. Everybody was kept together in close quarters, and there was a lot of crime within the prisons, which we kind of get into, but...
Okay. Okay. That I can see more. Yeah.
So each cell had their own skylight, thought to represent the eye of God and to remind prisoners that God was always watching. Remember, a lot of this is about repenting for their crimes and everything. The overall design of the prison was also for enacting a new type of prison system, which is now known as the Pennsylvania system or the separate system. This is a system that is based on housing criminals separately and not letting them communicate with each other, encouraging introspection about their crimes and sins.
But isn't it also deemed inhumane to put people in solidarity?
Yeah, kind of.
So...
But But again,
it goes back to at this time.
There's more to it. So, they would go as far as to put hoods over the heads of inmates when moving them around the building so no one could recognize each other within or outside of the prison walls once released, and so none of the inmates could see the layout of the prison. Guards would even wear fabric on their shoes to muffle their footsteps. They also wanted to ensure the inmates weren't completely isolated. So the warden was legally required to visit each inmate daily and the guards 3 times daily.
Okay.
And then there was a certain point where they would also allow like public visitors. And so some big names like Charles Dickens had visited the prison, and they would go in and they would talk to the inmates. And this was so that they weren't completely isolated and shut off from the world. They were just isolated from each other.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes more sense. But I was like...
But the solidarity thing gets... We'll get into that because there are some adverse effects to it because of the way they did it.
Well, okay, the way they did it, but I'm like, yeah, just being alone in general is just detrimental to any human health.
Well, yeah, and you have to remember this is the first time any prison has done anything like this. They set the ground for this kind of imprisonment.
Right. It was a work in progress. Mm-hmm. They had the idea, they had the best intentions, but not the best practices at the time.
So the system directly opposed the more popular system of the time, the Auburn system, which is also called the New York system. This system was the complete flip side of the coin and was built on the belief that prisoners should live together and work closely together in complete silence and could/should receive physical punishments.
Those poor non-violent offenders.
Mm-hmm.
I could imagine, like, weren't prisons like back then like more like slave camps?
So, yeah, part of there's so much, and I didn't want to delve too deep into it, but what this prison was built off of was the reform that was made to, I think it was called the Walnut Street Prison, which notoriously was awful. Men and women were housed together, normally multiple of them in the same cell. The guards would sell them liquor, and there was a lot of crime, including murders and rape and all sorts of things going on within this prison. And I believe it was some of the founding fathers of the country. They saw this and they were like, no. So they made some reforms, including separating men and women, having less people live in the same space. Obviously, no more fucking liquor sales in the prison.
Yeah.
Actually, and I don't even think that was a prison. I think it was a jail, if I remember correctly. So it was small, but just packed with people. They took some of that reform and brought it into this to try to make a world-class prison. Something that was completely new, that wouldn't just punish and put people in shitty situations. It was to try to rehabilitate them and help them live a healthier lifestyle once they got out.
Such a hard concept. So just can't even wrap my head around it.
It was, and I think still is believed, that a lot of people who choose criminal paths, that kind of has to do with their upbringing and their environment.
See, then you're getting the debate of nature versus nurture, when it's...
and there's certainly cases where that does 100% apply, and other cases where it's mental health, you name it. There's so many reasons people do what they do. We're never going to be able to cover them all.
I feel like there's just so much gray area when it even just comes to the human mind itself and trying to understand it. We barely understand it.
Yeah.
And the whole nature versus nurture, I just feel like people are trying to put it in black and white terms, but it's just one of those things you can't.
Almost nothing is black and white. And yeah. So the Pennsylvania system led to the prison being a state-of-the-art facility. Each cell was heated with water in the cold months, had its own tap water, and a flushable toilet. However, the toilets only got flushed manually by guards like twice a week, which was to prevent communication between inmates, like doing the flushing.
Gross.
Yeah.
Okay.
They ended up having a lot of plumbing issues with this system.
Oh, gee, you think?
Yeah. But think about this. The 1800s. Each of these cells had their own pipes that led into the main sewer system.
Right.
That's huge for that time. That's unheard of. They had the inmates had better facilities in their cells than the president did for a long time.
No. Mm-hmm. That's funny.
It's kind of funny, yeah. So more about the cells. There were small holes in the walls of each cell just big enough to pass food through. The doors were metal and layered with wood to cut down on excess noise, and there were peepholes in the doors that allowed guards to observe prisoners without them knowing.
I could see a big issue with that.
Each cell also had its own outside recreation area, separated by tall walls so inmates couldn't see or talk to each other. With this, they also wouldn't let inmates who were neighbors out at the same time, so they would kind of stagger them, like these two go out for this amount of time, they come in, and then like these two, and so they just kind of kept it like every other.
I guess it makes sense with that whole communication thing too, is you could talk to your cell neighbor, but you can't talk to the guy who's a cell beyond his.
Without yelling, yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Inmates were allowed to garden and even keep pets in their recreation areas.
Oh, did they? You got puppies and kitties?
While in the cells, the inmates were expected to work on chores and crafts.
I'd macrame all day.
I think it was more like stuff like shoe shining and like weaving, because this was...
I'd weave the fuck out of whatever I'm weaving. Ooh, basket weaving? Come on now.
The structure of the building has been described as a wagon wheel design, and this is because all of the cell blocks come together in the middle of the building at a central rotunda that was used for surveillance. All of the blocks were easily accessible and could be easily seen down from this rotunda, as well as the south corridor.
Okay, that makes sense. I was trying to imagine like what you meant by like a wagon wheel.
Yeah, so you've got the central rotunda, and then all of the cell blocks come off of it. You can look at the view of it, the sky view of it, and it totally makes sense.
Because I was thinking like a whole like more like a atrium kind of deal you could see down, but no, that makes a lot more sense the way you're saying it.
Yeah, you literally just have to turn to look down each cell block.
Just swivel.
I've got just a bunch of rapid fire information about Eastern State. There's so much information. I keep picking these topics that have so much information, like more than I even remember. So I decided to just compile a bunch of stuff that I thought was interesting and that could be pertinent to the story.
Hit us fast, hit us quick.
Okay. Originally, the design of the building was for 7 one-story cell blocks. But by the time the 3rd cell block was finished, the facility was already over capacity with inmates. This is why I mentioned that it opened before it was actually completed. Going forward, they made the rest of the cell blocks 2-story. And in some of the cell blocks, some or one of them, the 2nd story was reserved for women.
Okay.
Keep them separated.
I could see. Okay. Yeah.
Once they did start bringing women into the prison.
Right.
At the end of the 1800s, they needed a state-of-the-art hospital as diseases like consumption spread quickly throughout the cell blocks.
I mean, you have that many people. It's only a matter of time.
Eventually, the prison dropped its solitary system due to overcrowding.
Okay, yeah. Well, duh.
Yep. Towards the end of the prison's life, cell blocks 14 and 15 were designed and built hastily by the prisoners. Cell block 14 is where solitary confinement was, also known as the hole in most prisons, or specifically here, known as Klondike. These cells were built underground, had no light, no windows, no running water, and prisoners received very little food.
So the prisoners built this one, and it's the shittiest one to be in.
It's the solitary confinement. It's where you go when you are acting up. But we also know that there's plenty of prisons even now that will just toss people in solitary confinement for...
Like, even solitary confinement back then, it just...
So it's like, yeah, they had this, well, by this point, their solitary approach had come to an end.
Okay.
So it really was like, you're acting up, we can't trust you, whatever, we're going to put you down here. So they're basically sitting in a dirt hole.
Comfy.
And if I remember correctly, I think they just had a bucket to go in.
Ew. Gross. The smell, the flies, the maggots.
And
Ick.
These were actually built, well, like I said, it's toward the end of the prison's life. So this was within, I think, 20 or 30 years before the prison closed.
Oh.
And it closed technically it closed in 70, but when there was a riot at a nearby prison, it housed inmates for a short time. So it was officially closed in 71.
But still, 20 or 30 years worth of that living conditions in solitary? Disgusting.
Yeah. Cell block 15 was death row and maximum security. They had metal bars that separated the walkways between prisoners and guards. No executions ever actually took place at this facility, though.
Interesting. You'd think there would be, with how big and how massive it was.
They didn't have death row in this facility until 20 to 30 years before it closed.
True, so I guess they didn't even get it up. The way how fast death row inmates get the death penalty, it takes 20 or 30 years for them to get on the table.
Yep.
So, okay.
The prison also featured a combination baseball and football field and a standalone building that was eventually added as a kitchen.
Oh, fun.
Well, kitchen and bakery.
Ooh, bakery.
Mm-hmm. Apparently, the food is still a hot topic of debate. Some have said that it was pretty good for prison food, and others feel very differently about that.
That's not shocking.
No, not at all. Some famous criminals, such as Al Capone and Willie Sutton, spent time in Eastern State. Capone lived well.
Oh, I could imagine.
And I've seen his cell. They've restored his cell to what it looked like. And
Looked like a 5-star hotel room with bars.
It did. I've got, yep. So, like I said, he lived well. With his cell being complete with rugs, a cabinet radio, oil paintings, an armchair, and lamps.
Jesus.
And like I said, his cell has been restored to how he had it, and you can see it on tours, which is when I saw it. They had a little, like, kind of, after you do the haunt, they had the cell block set up as, like, a speakeasy thing. They had big band music playing. I think they actually had a band. And they had people dressed up in flapper costumes, with like zombie makeup and everything. It was pretty cool. But toward the end of that cell block, or at least that area, was Al Capone's cell, and they have it restored to how it looked. And yeah, it was pretty good. Willie Sutton helped to carry out a prison escape that included 12 inmates in 1945.
That's a lot of inmates for a prison escape.
Over the course of a year, they dug a 97-foot tunnel under the prison wall that managed to go undiscovered.
A 97-foot tunnel that no one noticed.
Well, and this is after they dropped the solitary approach. So, like, I feel like there's a lot more people moving around and everything, a lot more to keep track of.
Yeah.
So, earlier in the 1930s, during renovations, 30 unfinished inmate dug tunnels had been discovered.
30?
30.
My God. They really wanted to get out.
Mm-hmm. Eastern State was the first prison in America with a synagogue for Jewish prisoners.
Very progressive.
Mm-hmm. There was a dog named Pep sentenced to life at Eastern State for allegedly murdering the governor's wife's cat, though some say that the governor donated his dog to the prison to boost inmate morale.
Why would you just donate your dog?
I know, I have very mixed feelings on this.
Like, even if it did murder a cat, the dog did what a dog was going to do. What? It just sounds like you don't want the dog anymore.
I know, that's what I was thinking. But Pep has a mugshot.
Does he?
And you can see his inmate number.
Oh, no.
Which is C2559.
Is that supposed to spell something?
No.
Oh, it sounded like it was supposed to spell something.
Nope, I just thought that I saw the inmate number, so I would share it. He had his own file and everything, as far as I know.
2559. That's adorable.
So, on that adorable note, let's start into the darker side of its history.
Yay, dark side.
Overcrowding was something that occurred multiple times throughout its history, and we know that never leads to anything good.
Mm-mm.
The prison was meant to hold about 300 prisoners, but at one point was occupied by about 2,000.
Jesus Christ. It's like the Waverly Hill Sanatorium all over again.
You're right. I think those numbers were far worse, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's still... Oh. Okay.
So the prison upheld a silence rule, meaning no talking, no singing, or humming. And this rule drove a lot of inmates insane. Like, quite literally insane.
You can't make any outward noise. Yeah, I'd go insane too, listening to the voices in my head.
So one of the most notorious punishments inmates would receive there was having their wrists, which were tied behind their backs, chained to their tongues, and any struggle with the chains would result in the tongue being cut open by the tongue clamp.
What the fuck?
And there were inmates that died of blood loss because of this. Like, pretty much from what I remember, any movement could cause that clamp to, and this was it was an iron clamp to cut into your tongue.
What the fuck? Mm-hmm. That's barbaric.
I know. And this is something that I think pretty much exclusively happened here.
That, or it happened in very few places, because I've never heard of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Inmates would also be punished by being doused in water outside during winter.
It's just terrible.
And they would also be strapped tightly to a chair for days without food. And as you can imagine, if they're strapped to a chair for days,
gross,
they can't hold anything for days. So a lot of inmates ended up just sitting in their own filth.
You're going to get sepsis. They probably did get sepsis.
So like I said, solitary confinement was below ground with no windows, no lights, no running water, and little food. Some inmates would stay there for up to 2 weeks at a time. After, like, day 2, you've completely lost track of time. Just sitting in complete darkness. In my head, I would think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're literally making them feel less than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even worth more than dirt.
And my understanding is that there are places where solitary confinement is still very much like that. You get left there for extended periods of time in a dark cell with little to no light.
And the possibility of no plumbing either.
I think they have to... Oh, I don't know. I think there are some places where I think solitary confinement is literally just a mattress on the floor.
Gross.
And maybe a bucket. I don't know.
But
I feel like that wouldn't seem completely out of the realm to still be something happening.
Oh, God, no. Yeah. That's definitely got to be something that's happening to this day still.
Mm-hmm. So, while no executions happened on the property, there were plenty of murders of inmates and guards, and many inmates died here of old age or disease too. So just a lot of death on the property.
Wow, just every way, shape, and form.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, okay.
So let's get into the hauntings.
Wow. Hauntings.
Guests and employees hear giggling, whispering, and crying, but nothing is ever found when they go to look where the sound is coming from.
The giggling would... that'd send me.
In cell block 6, shadow figures like to run around.
Oh, I bet they do.
They just kind of dart back and forth. In cell block 12, cackling and voices echoing can be heard.
Do we know if the cackling is a man or a woman's voice?
I don't know.
But a cackle's a cackle.
A cackle's a cackle.
Not... okay.
So, I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to tell you what the article said.
Okay.
The ghost of an inmate named Joseph Taylor, who murdered another inmate, Michael Duran, is spotted wandering the halls at night. And this is the one that I texted you about, where it basically said Joseph Taylor had murdered Michael Duran to death.
Oh my God.
He was murdered to death. As if there's any other option.
There's no other murder. Murder's a murder. It's just... I thought about that when you texted me it, or snapped me it.
You're like, murder is death. There's no other way murder can go. It's...
Like, I'm gonna murder you to death. No shit, Sherlock.
I'm sorry, if somebody ever, like, genuinely said that to me, I wouldn't be able to keep a straight face.
No.
And then I would probably be dead on the spot.
Yeah, it was like, same. That's how one of us dies.
At least one of us. All right, here's a kind of a doozy for you.
Okay.
I believe this was in the 90s. While restoring cell block 4 and trying to remove a 140-year-old lock from a cell door, a locksmith said that a force overcame him and he wasn't able to move. He said he saw faces swirling towards him on the walls of the cell and a spirit beckoning to him. He stated that this negative energy came rushing out of the cell with a blast of cold air as he got the lock undone. Some think that by removing this lock, he opened a portal or a doorway, letting trapped spirits out, and guests also report seeing these swirling faces sometimes.
In that cell in particular, or now all over the place?
I have to imagine it's that cell, or at least that cell block. Which, thinking about it, so if we want to go into kind of like a metaphysical woo-woo
Let's do it.
side of this,
yes,
that would make sense, because chances are it's a 140-year-old lock. It's probably like an iron lock, right?
Oh, easily, yeah.
Iron is very protective. It can be used in like banishment and making like walls of protection, setting boundaries, things like that, which is part of the reason why railroad spikes are used in a lot of time in southern folk magic for protection. They're made of iron. And then just also the shape. So regardless, you've got this iron lock that's been stuck for 140 years. Who's to say that iron lock wasn't doing some sort of protection and keeping this doorway, this metaphysical, spiritual doorway closed? And as soon as he gets it open, that's all going to rush out. All of these spirits that have been trapped behind that lock.
Oh, absolutely. So that means that lock was there when it was built, though, too.
I mean, probably.
But then...
Well, yeah, it was in cell block 4, so it would have been about as old as the prison at this time.
So then it begs the question, was this a cell that was opened up all the time? Or is it just one time, just it's been locked and that's how it's been forever?
I don't know. For all we know, it could have been a 140-year-old lock that got put on this cell when it closed in the 70s. And since everything is pretty open, it could have rusted shut or something like that.
Right.
Like the elements could have gotten to it. So,
there's only one way to find out. We got to go and ghost hunt Hannah.
oh my gosh.
You got to use your medium abilities to communicate with
See,
the
and
ghosties.
I do really want to go back there and do like the actual like kind of guided and historical tours.
I mean, that'd be really cool just to learn more about it, yeah.
Yeah, especially now that I have tapped into my mediumship and everything. I would love to see what I pick up on while I'm there.
Lie. Oh, that's true.
Oh, it is a hot place for paranormal investigating. It's usually on most investigators' lists at this point.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
And it seems very rare, if at all, that any ghost like investigation teams leave without evidence.
If we go, we got to make sure that Zach Bagelbites isn't there before us.
Oh, they've already gone there.
Yeah, but you know him, he probably would go back. And for stupid reasons.
No, there's a lot of controversy surrounding Zach Bagelbites right now. Some people who have worked with him came out stating that after a certain point, a lot of it was faked.
No.
Right. I know.
There's no way Zach Bagelbites faked any of that show.
Not at all. Because obviously, like every other place they go to, he would absolutely get possessed every single time. Because why not?
But at the same time, I could believe that he could get possessed every single time because how he just pisses off those spirits.
Yeah.
I had to stop watching that show. For the first maybe season or two, it was good. After that, I was like, what, is this reality TV now? Like, this seems all scripted.
I watch it because it's so funny at this point.
It's so bad, it's funny.
It's like, I keep seeing like the screen grabs of them online where Zach is walking around a place shirtless, and he's like, "Do you like these tattoos?" And there's apparently an EVP that just goes, "They're sick."
Yes, because a ghost from like the 1800s is gonna go, "That's sick."
Right.
Like if you're going to imitate a disembodied voice, at least get something that's period correct. Mm-hmm. But I could go on about Zach Bagelbites for a hot minute.
So, okay.
Okay.
People have claimed to see a man standing in one of the guard towers, even though there's no way to get to the tower now because the stone stairs collapsed a while ago.
What's a while ago? Put me on the spot.
I mean, a while ago. They're like brick and stone steps. They literally like crumbled.
Oh, they were probably eroding way before the prison was even closed. So, okay.
Al Capone was actually haunted by a ghost during his time in Eastern State, and it followed him to Alcatraz and seemingly for the rest of his life. He would cry out in the night and be heard begging for Jimmy to leave him alone. It's believed that the ghost haunting him was Jimmy Clark, a man killed in the St. Valentine's massacre that Capone had ordered.
See, no, with a mob man like that, I could definitely see someone haunting him.
100%. He didn't pull the trigger, but he made the order.
Well, yeah. I mean, he in turn did pull the trigger.
Yeah, basically. Like, if he hadn't said anything, it wouldn't have happened. But
Exactly.
So, Eastern State Penitentiary now. The Eastern State Penitentiary Historic Site, Inc. is a nonprofit dedicated to prison reform and educating the public.
Nice.
Today, you can go on tours through the facility and learn about its history. The building also holds art installations and exhibits. During spooky season, they've been known to host a haunted house attraction called Halloween Nights, which, like we mentioned, is what I was there for.
Mm-hmm.
In the last couple of years, though, I read that they've started leaning into a more educational, interactive, and historic walkthrough, though according to the website, there's still like 5 different haunted houses.
Good. I mean, you should still have some haunts in there.
Well, and these historical like walkthroughs and interactive ones, they still have actors in them and everything.
But it's not scary. I like the educational purposes of it,
So,
but
and
I
it's
want to go for
because
scary.
a lot of the people working there and running the place, they want to try to move away from, like, not necessarily move away, but not put so much emphasis on the dark parts of its history and bring back kind of its initial intention.
Right, what it was built for. Because, I mean, like you said,
Yeah.
it was built for reform to make these criminals productive members of society. And it was founded on some very good beliefs. Some now maybe ass backwards beliefs, but good beliefs back then. But then, like you're saying, now everyone focuses on the dark history because we as a culture like the dark and morbid.
Have our morbid curiosities.
We do. But I do like that they want to stem more towards the educational part of it too, because I mean, what we've learned here in your story is there's a lot of historical greatness to that. It's not an asylum. Or is it an asylum?
No, it's a penitentiary.
Penitentiary,
It's a prison.
yeah. Oh, I don't. Asylum was like stuck in my head.
Yeah.
No, penitentiary.
Well, we know that prisons and asylums tend to have very similar histories.
Right.
So,
But no, I like that. But maybe there's a way that they could coexist with each other.
and I think that's what they did. It
Okay.
looked like there was a lot more attractions than I remember when I was looking at like kind of the map, because they have an overview of the property, the facility,
Right.
and they have like marks of like different haunted houses. There was like I think it was called like a Lore and S'mores corner or something like that, which I'm like down 100%.
Done.
Say less, I'll be there.
When you went, was there only one haunt, or was there
No,
multiple?
there was multiple haunts to go through.
Okay.
The bummer is that because of the time that we went, because we went obviously after the hayride was closed, a lot of the haunts were doing blackout nights
I hate when haunts do blackout nights.
because you can't see anything.
It's so honestly, I think it's a money waste.
I was honestly focusing a lot on just trying to like make it through without tripping and dying.
Well, and I feel like that's a lot of people's thoughts behind it too when they go, and their experience is like,
and
I couldn't see
especially
anything,
when
and I tripped over everything.
when other haunt people go and because they want to go see it and everything. But we got into that little like speakeasy area that I was telling you about because I think we were talking to one of the people running it, and they were like, "Oh, did you guys get tickets to go in here?" We were like, "No, we just got tickets for the haunts." And they were like, "Well, come on." So we went in there, and those ones actually had some of the cells open. That was actually lit up. And
cool.
That whole
Okay.
cell block was lit up, and like so we went and we sat in a couple different cells, and
Ooh, eerie.
and you have to like duck down to get into.
Oh wow. Okay, so you really that whole bowing thing is okay.
Yeah, you
cool.
really have to like completely duck. Watching Kyle walk into those was hilarious.
God, I bet. Kyle, if you're listening,
We know he's listening.
oh yeah, we know he is.
So, and of course, I had to go look at the gift shop while I was on their website. So
course.
here's some of my favorites. This is probably going to become a recurring thing with places that have gift shops.
Okay, let's hear it.
There's a plushie of Pep and a mug with his headshot on it.
Does it have his little inmate number on it
I
too?
think he's got a little collar with a tag that probably has the inmate number.
Love it.
There's a gargoyle snow globe. 'Cause that's the only snow globe I ever want.
I'm like, I didn't think I needed a snow globe until now.
And some vintage style posters for their Halloween Nights attraction. So think like old Halloween, like vintage
Are we talking 70s vintage or like even earlier vintage?
I would say like a range from.
Oh, okay.
From those.
From multiple different decades.
Yeah. And yeah, I thought they were really cute.
I'm going to have to look at this website.
Mm-hmm. But that is Eastern State Penitentiary.
That was a really good story, you know.
Thank you. I did all of the research today. And I finished it like within a half an hour, 45 minutes before coming over here. I had a busy weekend.
A very busy weekend, apparently.
All right, Austin, what's your story?
Whew. All right.
Is it going to kill my soul again?
I don't know. We'll find out.
Oh, great.
So today, I thought I would cover the oldest known cold case in Minnesota.
Okay.
So, this case follows Albin and Elvira Johnson. Albin was described as a strong man type. Albin, not
Okay.
Alvin. Albin.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It took me a while to I'm like, every time I typed, it was Alvin. No, it's Albin. So, there's some interesting names throughout this story.
Great, I'm ready.
So Albin was a strong man type, like the typical farmer woodsman kind of deal. Elvira was a gentle person who was described as pretty with blonde hair and blue eyes. They had 7 children, with the 8th child on the way. The children's ages were anywhere from 4 months to 10 years old. Some thought Albin was a hardworking man, where others thought he was a mean and violent man. And Elvira's family was very much against them getting married, and no one has known their marriage to be a stable one. So on April 12th, 1933, the home of Albin and Elvira Johnson's house caught fire. The fire was noticed around 3:30 a.m. by, here's the next interesting name, Ragnar Krantz.
What a name.
I had to read that so many times. I thought I was missing. I thought Ragnar was the last name and then Krantz was somebody else's first name. But yeah, Ragnar Krantz. He and his family lived about a half-mile away from the Johnsons' farmhouse. Krantz's 5-year-old son remembers waking up to an orange flickering light like waves on his bedroom walls. Ragnar called Harris and the Rush City Fire Department. Krantz then went over to
this is in Rush City.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. It's actually in Harris.
Oh,
which
yeah.
is very close to Rush City.
Yeah, that's just before Rush City. When was this?
This was in 1933.
Okay.
Yep. I did mention that, but I totally forgot to mention where this took place in Minnesota.
That's fair.
So, yeah, for everyone, we're in Harris, Minnesota. Thank you. So Ragnar went over to the farm as fast as he could. He remembers pulling up to the burning building and it just being completely destroyed. A few hours later, the phone rings at Elvira's sister's home. And Elvira's niece remembers the events of that morning, and she says she'll never forget them. She heard her mother, Frida, screaming over and over again about hearing her sister's home being destroyed and potentially having no survivors.
Oh, God. I don't blame Frida.
No, Frida, Elvira's niece, they didn't give her name. I think it was more for a protection thing. But, yeah, Frida's name came over, and, man, I couldn't imagine getting a call like that.
Mm-hmm.
So once they were able to put the fires out and everything was just embers, by 4 p.m. that day, so that would be on the 12th. Yeah, because that would happen at 3:30 in the morning. So by 4 p.m. that afternoon, all the bodies were finally identified. The bodies they found were Elvira and her 7 kids, all burned alive in the house. Except for Albin. His body was never found.
Oh, that's convenient.
When the investigators found the bodies were all asleep in their beds in the sleeping positions, which led investigators to believe that Elvira and her children were murdered. Then the house was set on fire.
Yeah, I'd fucking say so.
Some investigators think that Albin had snapped, killed his family, and set the house ablaze, and then possibly killed himself and would be found nearby.
Do you think somebody accidentally called him Alvin and it was just the last straw?
I bet he has never not heard that in his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So over the next couple days, in the woods, in the small lakes around the homestead, They were searching for Albin's body, and there was about 50 people out looking for him. After about a week of searching, over 300 people had joined the search team looking for Albin. They combed rivers and nearby lakes and a stretch of the St. Croix River between Sunrise and Rush City, but there was still no trace of him. Now, there was a $50 reward for any information leading to Albin's whereabouts. And you get $50 though for a reward. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, 1933.
Yeah,
I think that's like $2,000 or $3,000 in today's money or something like that.
I'm gonna look it up real quick.
Okay.
$50 in 1933 is equivalent in purchasing power to about $1,160.91 today.
Oh, okay. I guess I wasn't too far off with the $2,000.
Nope.
So on October 20th, 1933, the district attorney would finally charge him with first-degree murder, but that's if they find and when they catch him. If and when.
Messy.
Now we're going to back up just a little bit here to the funeral of Elvira and her children. It actually happened the Saturday following the tragedy. The service was held in Rush City's Lutheran Church, where Elvira grew up attending. The remains of all 8 fit into one flowered decked casket. That's all they could find, and they put them all into one casket.
That's, kind of beautiful.
It is the whole families together.
Be with their mom. Mm-hmm. And not their shitty dad who probably lit them on fire.
And over 350 people attended the service as well to remember them.
Oh.
So they had a lot of loved ones. Now, here are some of the theories as to why the police think Albin would kill his family. He and his family had been kicked out of multiple families' homes, including his dad's home, which they had been kicked out multiple times just at his place as well. And the next day, after the fire, they were actually supposed to move out again because the landlord, Albin's brother-in-law, kicked them out of that homestead.
Why were they being kicked out?
Because they couldn't make rent, they couldn't make payments, and Albin was just a shitty person when it came to...
Did he spend all of his money on alcohol?
Actually, that was never discussed on if he had an alcohol problem or not.
Just looking at patterns and what you've told me so far.
It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. Yeah. But he was a struggling farmer, and that's why a lot of these families' homes were on homesteads or farmland. Mm-hmm. So he could try to make a living and make a better life for his family. But he just didn't have that green thumb, it seemed like. Some say Albin was not handling being poor and starving very well and decided to start life over and go work as a logger in Canada, which he had done before. So investigators put a bulletin here.
That's so ironic because he could have been a logger here.
Realistically, up in Duluth.
Look at the St. Croix.
The St. Croix, Duluth, anything along the St. Croix.
Mm-hmm. And he was close to the St. Croix.
Yeah.
In 1933, that's not close to the St. Croix, but it's close enough.
Close enough to where
I know that a lot of the loggers on the St. Croix actually just camped out along the river in the warm months, so.
Might as well. It's peaceful sleeping next to the St. Croix.
Yeah.
I can't wait to do that this summer. So with that theory of Albin going up into Canada, investigators put out a bulletin here in Minnesota, along with the neighboring states, and in Canada with the local Mounties. It's a fun word to say. Mounties. They're not police, they're Mounties. One journalist wrote, Albin was a proud man who did not have the means to support his family, tempted to take drastic measures. And with that, there was also no shortage of rumors going around. One
proud man who will murder his whole family because he can't afford them.
But at the same time, we don't know where he is.
No, we don't know where he is, but
no,
I'm just on this bandwagon that he did it, so.
So with all these rumors going around, one rumor said, for some reason, and rumors travel so fast, it's like the telephone game. Mm-hmm. So this rumor said that the victims, so Elvira and her kids, were all beheaded and the heads were piled up in the basement. There's no proof of that, but hey, you think what you want to think.
Wouldn't that just be something?
Man, that sounds like that's a serial killer kind of ritual or cult kind of deal.
That's just fully unhinged. Not that this isn't already
I was going to say, I'm like...
this is already unhinged, but if that were true, that would just be fully unhinged. He holds resentment against them.
Right. Instead of just
being I'm going to get rid of them.
Just going to kill them and then set the house on fire and make it look like an accident.
And move to Canada.
Others thought that they may have been shot because at the burned house they found 2 pistols and a rifle. Nothing was ever said if they were loaded, unloaded, had been shot or discharged, mainly because they were so burned and melted. Mm-hmm. Some thought that it was actually Albin's brothers, because a few weeks earlier, Albin and them got into a huge fight, and they thought that his brothers killed his wife and kids, and then killed him and set the house on fire, then burying Albin somewhere nearby.
Okay.
And one reason why they thought that this was a good plausible theory is due to the fact that his brothers, all 3 of them, never seemed interested in finding Albin or the person who set the fire or killed anybody, or killed Elvira or any of the kids.
I mean, I'm not defending them in this, but I'm saying I can see it either way, that, like, 1, they did it, or 2, they're just kind of relieved to not have to deal with Albin and his bullshit anymore, so they're like, whatever.
See, that's what I was kind of thinking too, was, I mean, if he was perceived by some as a mean and violent man, I could see why his brothers wouldn't want to try to find him. Like, sucks that his gentle wife and kids are dead, but good thing he's not here.
Lord knows what he did to his brothers while they were growing up too. If he was a mean and violent man, like, he didn't just wake up one day like that.
Right. But as well, investigators are still not sure how they were all murdered and how they were all in their sleeping positions. Like, how are 8 people dead and all were in their beds, nobody was moved or anything like that? Granted, it was burned, but to have bodies laying in bed?
I wonder if they were poisoned.
Ooh. That's a good one. Albin could have poisoned them.
Or heavily drugged so that they stayed asleep while the house burned.
Man, I don't know what they would have had back then, but, I mean, there had to have been something.
Enough opium will do the fucking trick.
I guess. I guess alcohol would do the same thing for kids, maybe, too, if that was one thing. But yeah. I don't know what was easier to get, alcohol or opium back then. So some thoughts by Albin's family. Albin's family firmly believes that he did not murder his family. Sure, he had some anger issues, but not to the point of murder, said one family member. They believed he died in that fire, and his body was so burned up that they couldn't even identify any type or part of his body.
And that's kind of what I was thinking too, but I'm also thinking if, like, the children's bodies didn't completely burn, why would this large man's body completely, unless, like, he was started on fire, and that's how the rest of the house started on fire. Oh,
okay. I could see that. You might be onto something there, too. So some interviews as well happened during the investigation. Police went around, especially to Ragnar Krantz. One of his statements says that he went and bought a firearm for his protection in case Albin ever returned. Ragnar was actually fearful of his life of Albin, he told police and journalists as well. Another resident said of Harris, they said, "We are all afraid of Albin." Now, some say that this was just because these people didn't like Albin, so they were just pushing that narrative even more and more. But there's also the theory, there's also goes back to, there's a lot of people that says he's a mean and violent man.
It all makes me think of the witch trials, where none of those people who were killed were witches. And usually somebody in the community just had a problem with them. So, like, I don't know. We know that humans can be shitty enough like that, so...
Oh god, humans are the shittiest. I have a problem with you. Witches are a thing. She's a witch. If she floats like a duck. I can't remember that whole thing.
It's, stones would be tied to their hands and feet, and they would be tossed in a body of water. If they floated, they were witches. Mm-hmm. If they sunk and drowned, they weren't a witch, but they were still dead.
That's right.
And if they floated, they would then hang them. Or burn them, or whatever.
Do you know where I learned most of my witch knowledge?
Where?
Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Okay, well, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say a lot of that probably isn't true.
No.
There's probably some things that are, but...
No, so if you watch the movie, they actually go into, like... Well, not actually, like, into the logistics of what they're saying, but how people's thought processes were back then.
Yeah.
And so the whole, like, they had to dumb it down to where, so if she floats like a duck, she's a witch. Precisely. Which turned out to be kind of true. If they float, witch, if they drown, oh, she was human.
But at the same time, I don't think anybody floated.
There was even one citizen that said they feared that Albin would exact his revenge on whoever killed his family, and he was not going to allow anyone to step in his way.
He's got to be around to do that.
Right? Somebody actually thought...
He's got to be present for that to happen.
Somebody thought that he was just hiding out, waiting to exact his revenge.
You said he was a woodsman, right?
Yeah, he was a woodsman. So potentially he could be out and thriving off the land, for all we know.
Yeah.
I mean, back in 1933, not too far off from living off the land.
Yeah.
I mean, the Industrial Revolution just happened 5-10 years prior.
Mm-hmm.
No, probably closer to 20 years at that point. Anyways, getting off track. 3 years after the tragedy, Albin's brother-in-law, Harry, wrote a note to the Chisago County attorney stating the investigation was botched. Which would be... There was little to no information on the investigative work that I could find. And even from reading this note and reading so many other, like, interviews from people back then, it really goes to show you that there was no police investigation into this, or wasn't released publicly.
Why am I not surprised?
Police work, I tell you, man. So, in the letter Harry wrote to the attorney, these charges range from perjury to destruction of evidence to incompetence and negligence, and to railroading a murder indictment against a man known to be dead to cover up the ghastly blunder of the deputy coroner who had cast Johnson's remains outside the foundation where they were trampled underfoot by spectators. They were just throwing these people's remains around.
No, knock it off.
Yeah.
Be nice.
Literally,
They're dead.
They were scooping them up and doing that.
No wonder they could fit them all into one casket.
I mean, that deputy coroner who's supposed to document every single bit of information of these charred corpses
Can't do that.
Didn't even do his job right because they were just thrown out of the house.
Wait, did he allow them to be thrown out, or were they thrown out before he got there?
He essentially allowed them to be thrown out.
Well, fuck that guy.
There was one account that said they just watched the coroner see the remains getting thrown out.
Great. Wonderful.
So instead of like, hey, guys, stop. Oh, it'll be fine.
He's just watching them looking.
So a lot of people speculate as well that cops were paid off. Some say by Albin.
Albin, who had no money.
See?
No money, Albin.
But others say that it was his brothers. Killed everybody and paid off police. But there's no records confirming nor denying this.
No, there wouldn't be records confirming or denying that.
Exactly. So, as of just about a week ago, actually, no, 5 days ago, it was the 90-year anniversary of this murder. Happened on April 12th, 1933.
Yeah.
And still, no new evidence. And like I said, when I started the story, it is the oldest known cold case in Minnesota. But it was actually found to not be covered by local news at all, or very, very minimally. But in national news, it was all over the headlines. There's actually residents that live in Rush City in Harris that don't even know this even happened. Even ones that have lived there their entire lives.
Okay.
Right? Like, you'd think that, yeah, the local news would cover this immensely, but no. National news covered this more than local news.
That's crazy.
And there was actually a independent, a person who's really into their historical society went out and did a poll on on if they know this case or any of these names. And everyone's like, huh? No, never heard of it.
It's a little disheartening.
A little bit to know something that tragic happened in your community, but there's no history on it.
Yeah, or no, like, easily accessible, like, information on it so that, everybody knows about it.
Right. And as well, Albin has never been found, and nor have any leads ever come up as well. Just kind of just disappeared.
I'm gonna stay up all night wondering where the fuck Albin went.
Well, it's a good thing Albin was in his 30s at the time. 30s or 40s at the time, so he's long gone and dead.
Yeah. Well, and even in the 30s, it was still very easy to just, like, up and move and change your identity.
That, too. Very easy. And he could have very well gone to Canada and done the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Just been a logger.
And kept all the money for himself.
And there's actually a book out that was written by Elvira's nephew. His name's Brian Johnson, and the book is called Murder in Chisago County, The Unsolved Johnson Family Mystery. So what do you think? Do you think Albin did it?
I think Albin did it.
But what do you think happened to him?
I think with them having to move out, you said it was the following day?
Mm-hmm.
Between that and there was probably something else that was like the last straw for him. And so I think he drugged the family because as far as we know the investigation was pretty shoddy, but as far as we know there weren't any bullets found even after the fire. And so probably drugged them, set the house on fire, and just fucking took off into the woods. Because if it happened in the middle of the night, that would have given him hours to get away.
Oh, absolutely.
And get out of the area. And...
So you don't think he was blamed then?
What?
You don't think he was blamed?
I don't think enough people blamed him because it seems relatively obvious. It's kind of... At least to me. I feel like it would be hard to look at all of that and go, no, there's no way he did it. Especially with his reputation and the fact that multiple people later came out and said that they had feared for their lives around him. I think there's a pretty good chance that he did it and he got away. And if he was already thinking of the logging opportunity in Canada, he could have taken off up there. Very easy to change your identity in a different country at that time. And he probably went and did that and made all the money that he didn't have to spend on a family.
I mean, see, these are all very plausible theories as well. And you brought up some theories that I didn't even think of, nor did anyone else that I could find in research. So it's like there's a whole new aspect. I like to play devil's advocate, but I do think that it was potentially his brothers, that they just got into this whole thing. But what doesn't make sense is that Elvira was this kind and gentle person. Why would his brothers kill her and the kids instead of just making Albin go disappearing?
Maybe equally as shitty as Alvin, if not worse.
That could be it because we don't know the full story on the family, and they could all have been shitty. Mm-hmm. It's very well possible. I'd like this cold case to be like brought up again or something.
I bet
or
you
like
could do some research on the family and find out more.
What I was thinking is potentially like going up to like Rush City or Harris.
Look at public
and
records.
Go to find public records. I could probably even find public records on
sometimes
the interwebs.
It depends. I was helping one of my friends and coworkers the other day. They tend to have a lot of spooky experiences in their house. Mm-hmm. And the ghost in particular we were dealing with, I felt like was connected to the land and whatever used to be on the land that his townhouse is on now. I ended up helping the spirit pass over, but I told him, I was like, look into public records. I gave him a couple different names. One of them, oddly enough, ended up being, I believe he said grandparent names on both his and his wife's side of the family. So maybe that grandparent was just coming through. But he started looking into names and he gave me a list and he was like, what stands out to you? And so I pointed to a few and then he found out like all of those names were connected and they were like the few names that really filled a local cemetery and all of this stuff. But anyway, long story long, he went to go look at public records and he couldn't find them online. So he called the city and asked about it, and they were like, they're not online, but if you come down to, I think it was like City Hall or something, you can access the public records.
Well, that means I'm going to have to take a little trip up there then sometime.
There's a story that I'm going to cover. I'm actually thinking about covering it next week, but I've always been fascinated by the place, and I've always wanted to go and look at public records regarding it.
Here in Minnesota?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I think the local library holds the public records, but there might be old, not to give too much away, like patient records and stuff as well, that I could find, but there are still patients like living today. I've watched videos of them talking about the stuff that went on there and everything, and a lot of them were not that old.
Oh.
So.
Well, I'm going to stop you right there because I don't want to know anymore. My interest has been piqued, and I look forward to it on the next week or whenever you actually decide to bring it off.
If you want something else local that is true crime, Brenda suggested on one of our polls. I keep saying Brenda like she's not my mom. Pat and Brenda are my parents.
Brenda!
Brenda suggested the history of gangsters in and around White Bear Lake and St. Paul, like Al Capone.
Okay.
Who, like, gangsters loved White Bear Lake and St. Paul in this general area.
Oh, yeah.
And
Especially because of those caves.
Yeah, I was going to say you could delve into the Wabasha Street caves, or I could delve into those because there's also paranormal stuff with that. So we'll figure it out. But there are a lot of local places that we're going to probably start delving more into. I know personally for me, the first few episodes, I wanted to focus on some more popular topics and stories, but I plan on getting into more local places soon, especially because there's a paranormal investigation team that spent time going through Wisconsin to a bunch of haunted places.
Nice.
And after watching their like docu-series on it, dude, they got some wild fucking evidence.
Ooh. Nice.
Like, there was one where they caught, like, a full shadow figure on video, and you can see it darting through a doorway into another one. And it's clear as day. I think that's episode 8.
I think that does wrap up episode 8 for us here today.
So, Hannah, before we end this episode, do you got our cemetery fun fact of the week?
I do. So this is about graves.
Of course, it's about graves.
It's a cemetery fun fact.
If the person lived a good life, flowers will grow in the grave. If the person was evil, weeds will grow.
I do hope that's 100% true. Bad people need weeds. See, this is where I get to the point where it's like I'm kind of fried from everything, and I just can't think of a good send-off.
Yeah, and we did so much talking, so thank you for listening.
Thanks for joining us.
Friendly reminder to follow on wherever you're listening and social media. Interaction on social media is very helpful for us, as well as just interaction on the streaming services, like following or downloading, hearting an episode, whatever. So,
yeah, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you get notified with the latest episodes. And you can head over to our website at thebleedinggrave.com for our latest episode and anything that happens new to us on there. And as well, another big old shout out to Mitch Goggins at Duluth Tattoo Co. Hit him up on Instagram at Minnesota Mitch Tattoo. Again, he is a great artist. If you want anything traditional, go see Mitch. Or just check out his artwork and share it. Share the love. One love, everybody.
Yeah, go interact with his Instagram account, too.
Nicely put, Hannah.
Just go do it.
Go do it. Do the thing. Do all the things.
All right.
You can do it. We believe in you. We love you guys. Anyone who's listening, we love you. Anyone who can hear me saying this right now, we love you.
I thought you didn't have anything to say.
I all of a sudden had a lot to say. And I don't know why,
right.
but I'm going to keep going down this road.
Stop
and I can
talking.
stop anytime now. See you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye. The Bleeding Grave is hosted by Hannah Slavic and Austin Winger.
Music by Hannah Slavic.
You can find us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
You can listen to The Bleeding Grave on Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Google Podcasts.